Under the same moon, we share the love. Embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spreading peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World 777. Tonight, we have a great show in store. We're going to talk about some things that has everybody puzzled about the world and just how can we move forward. You know, when you think about life and raising the bar, what comes to your mind? Probably elevating to a higher level. So here on Watching the World, we have someone with us tonight that can help us do that. She is a law professor talking about raising the bar. That's what we try to do, to bring quality people to you so that we can get the actual real news that you can actually apply the benefits in your life, because you get to find out how this news works in harmony with the law and your day-to-day life. And if you have those questions, feel free to submit. We would happy to answer them for you. Let's bring on with us Candace Kelly, one of the best to ever do it. Thank you.
Mel, hello, good to see you. I love sitting with you on a Wednesday to discuss what is going on in the world. Like you said, when we talk about everything that's going on in the world and things that affect us, the law often has a lot to do with it. And I love it that people are so informed and want to join shows like this, which is why you're so popular, in order to understand what's going on out in the world.
All right, awesome. What do you think? A lot has happened since we last did our show together, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the main things is that you flew out to the scene of the missing mother, Savannah Guthrie's mother. And I thought that that was incredible. We know there are a lot of people that went out there. I just haven't talked to you firsthand about it. And while it's still ongoing, I'm just tonight especially interested in hearing from you. Yes, I'm flipping it a little bit, Mel, because that's great that you went out there, and that's what this is all about in terms of seeking answers, and finding what your audience wants to hear.
All right, I'm ready. Let's go.
Well, I know. Listen, I'm just very curious. What was it like on the ground? I know that tomorrow and Friday we're going to hear from Savannah Guthrie for the first time, talking to her former co-host, Hoda Kotb. And I just, being on the ground is so much different. And I know that it's hard to really get a sense from just the cameras being there, but hearing you and how you articulate what's going on because it's so detailed, what was it like?
You know, it's kind of fascinating. I pulled up to the scene and there's cars stretched out to Kingdom Come all the way down the road. You could just see all of the vans and all the high-tech media. But you know what? There was something permeating within me. And I have to say, I'm out here, boots on the ground in New York City. You know what it's like, right?
Yes.
You know, it's the concrete jungle out here.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Remember when Diddy's trial was happening, a guy went over to the other courthouse at 100 Center and did this to the, I don't want to speak of the violence, but to the marshals that work in the court. So anything can happen, even in the courthouse, right?
Yeah,
But you know
absolutely.
what? But you know what? It was different out there. Not knowing who took her, it was different. And when it got dark outside at night, everybody's like a little bit leery because they still don't know who took the lady. So that was a different kind of anxiety people were experiencing out there, boots on the ground, because you don't know who it could be. And sometimes these people come back to the scene. So
Yeah.
it was just like the boogeyman effect. That's what people were calling it.
Yeah. I also would imagine that, since this is new territory, you had to kind of feel your way around. Like, what it's like going to the federal courthouse system and who to speak to, how to get in anywhere. You know all the rules. But out there, was there anything that struck you in terms of just how the police operated differently, how the media operated a little differently? Were you helpful to each other? Did you meet people along the way like we do when we're standing on line for whatever federal trial here in the city?
You know what I observed out there? While I was there for over a week, I really didn't see a lot of police activity. I didn't see the feds at all. And I was shocked by that because there were a couple times when they actually did filmings and to the media, it appeared that the feds were out looking. So it almost seemed like they were just putting that out there to the public to make it seem like they're really searching. But while I was there, they were actually restricting people from really going out to search, discouraging searching. And I couldn't figure that out. Like, why are we not out here
Mm.
searching? So it was puzzled by that.
Yeah, because normally when someone is missing, people like more boots on the ground. People like more people cascading. I mean, a lot of these people are volunteers who are helping police officers, often, especially when, say a young child is missing, that's normally the MO. So it is interesting to see how they are functioning here. I think the other thing is that, the police, they cannot and should not tell us every single thing in case they are onto something. Did you get a sense that there might have been some of that in the air?
Yeah, a lot of that. The sheriff, what happens is, remember initially there were some, we call them high caliber YouTubers that used to work for the big MSM.
Yes.
And they were coming out making statements about perhaps the back door was left open. There was a lot of different things said. Well, the sheriff would come out later and say, "Oh, none of that's true." And then when
Mm,
when I was there, they said it was January the 11th that the person that came through initially,
yeah.
and that's where the steel frame photo comes from. They said from January the 11th. So then, as I was leaving, that came out into the media. Then 2 weeks later, we hear the sheriff say, "Oh, that's not true. We don't know if it was January the 11th or not."
Oh.
So how can you solve a case when everybody's confused? It's almost like the confusion is by design.
But I guess that is as expected because first of all, I mean, at the time that you went out, which was when was that about 3 weeks ago?
Yes, I believe
Yeah.
so.
At the time, I'm not sure if the award was $1.2 million. That's what it is now. But uh, there's got to be just a lot of confusion when there's money involved and you're getting tips and you just don't know what to do. Were you able to get any more information than what we had while you were on the ground? What I'm really curious about is just did the town feel like it was on edge? Were you received well by people? Because some people they don't welcome, they like their quiet town. They understand that she went missing and there has to be a search party, but they don't understand all the outsiders. Were they good to the outsiders, the townspeople, or what was the feel?
A lot of people were quite receptive, but then some were pushing back very heavily. In fact,
Mm,
some guys would come through on their bicycle and say, "Listen, there's so many people that go missing every day. Why are you out here looking for one lady? Get out of here." These
mm.
guys, they would come through on their regular bike ride. Just a few guys, rubble rousers, as they would say, just trying to stir up the peace. But they were actually neighbors saying, "Listen, we want you guys to go." Then maybe while I was there 5 days, I saw signs go up and say, "Listen, we want the media out of here. Let us heal. Let us search for Nancy ourselves." Something like that. I actually posted the photos out there.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm wondering too, there are some juries that, let's say when a murder happens, that they are allowed to go visit the crime scene as a group of jurors. What did you collect being there? Even if you couldn't get very close, but what did you get a sense of being there that you just can't get a sense of by watching it on TV or hearing, the evidence that's been collected?
So let me give you a couple things. Number one, just the weather, right?
Mm,
I heard someone that's really public today, and they have a grand channel. They brought on a professional and they were talking about the blood stains by the door.
yes.
And because it's so hot out there that the blood must have dried just like that. But
Ah.
being there, boots on the ground, I realized early in the morning, it's freezing through the night. And remember,
Mm.
remember the person came in the night, so it's likely that her blood fell in the night. So you can't go by the heat because it only gets hot like right around noon. It's burning hot. And then by 5 p.m., I was starting to get chilly again. So being there, boots on the ground, helped me to understand that part of it.
Yeah.
Another part is in the video, you see the person approach the door,
Yes.
and we wonder how in the world did the person get in the door. So, being there, boots on the ground, I had a chance to actually see that there's like a gate door that's
Mm-hmm.
black. That's black. You know, I have some history. I know how to construct some things, right?
Okay.
So, um, there was no scratches on that black door, the heavy door. If the person tried to use a crowbar, it would have to bend that metal. The metal was not bent, so I had a chance to actually see. Also, I was able to see that she had a deadbolt on that gated door, and
Mm-hmm.
also a keyed lock. So I was able to really understand that there's really no way that person could have gotten through that door within the amount of minutes, probably 16 minutes that they were tinkering around with it. Although it could have been longer. So
Mm-hmm.
it just goes to show that it made me wonder, like, how did this person really get in? The other thing is her driveway is these fancy little rocks, I call it, right?
Yeah.
But whenever the sheriffs were guarding the house 24 hours and they would change shifts, probably 3 times a day, every time they would drive on those rocks, you would hear it. And you can,
Oh.
especially at night, you would hear those rocks turning. Even when you walk on the driveway, we could walk on it a little bit. You could just hear the gravel. So whoever came in to take her, they would have had to have gotten around if they tried to drive and get her. I mean, the neighbors are going to hear those rocks. You know, if somebody happened to be up, they could hear those rocks turning.
Right, right. An early morning jogger or somebody who's walking their dog late at night. It seemed like, the aerial views that I mean, I wouldn't call it desolate, but it didn't seem like you could be able to those neighbors were not close. You know what I mean? Yes, you could be walking by, but I don't it didn't seem like if you scream loud that a neighbor would be able to naturally hear you. That
Oh, yes, the neighbors are very close. That's the other
Oh, okay.
thing. Oh, man, the neighbors are very close, and that's the misconception that I had looking from afar.
Yeah.
I thought it was far from the road, and I thought that the neighbors were like so far away. No, your neighbors are like a rock throw each way, and even in the
Really?
in the back, yeah. So you could actually hear. The other thing that I noticed, because I would be out there in the street, we were live streaming all day. You would hear the dogs barking like crazy. So
Wow.
the neighbors had dogs. The dogs appeared to be inside of homes, but they were barking. So I would imagine at night the dogs would have been barking.
And were there typical street lights, or did it seem to be a little, darker than if you were,
I,
say,
I'm from the South. I'm from the South, so I grew
okay.
up on those dark country roads, but we did have a light or two along the way. Out there, never experienced it before. It's pitch black dark. That's what they call it.
That's what I thought. That's the sense I got. Yeah. I is that for aesthetics or is that, that's it's just very interesting that it would be pitch black, but I did
It's the light pollution because of astronomy and all of the studies and so forth that they have there. They have different ordinances where you can't have the lights out. So, imagine with all that darkness and then somebody come and get you in the middle of
Yeah.
the night. That's worse than a horror movie.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. In the pitch black, I know in some movies they have those glasses where you can see in the dark. I remember that in one Hannibal Lecter movie, he was in the basement, but they both had he had the glasses on to be able to see in pitch black. Yeah, but it reminded me of just kind of the pitch blackness that I think about in that type of movie. You stayed there a week. Did you kind of and you look, I can ask you questions for an hour. So if you're going to have to cut me off. Let me just say that. You're going to have to say we need to go to the Epstein files. But
All right, we have time.
okay, in terms of just when you went out there, what was your plan of action and did that change along the way because of different moving parts that you just didn't know what to expect? And was this your first time out there? Were you familiar with the area?
Yeah, it was my first time out there. My plan of action was to actually make a difference, perhaps, but I wanted to start off with observation. I immediately requested to meet with the sheriff just to see if he would talk. He wouldn't
Yeah.
talk. He wouldn't talk. And I've tried up to 7 times already, 8 times actually by now, and
Mhm.
he doesn't want to really answer those tough questions. I just wanted to know a few things about the scene that was quite troubling, that they probably wouldn't have told me anyway, but I wanted to at least have that opportunity. I came 11 hours to fly one way, so I wanted to make it worthwhile. But, getting out there, it was basically streaming all day. I went out there while they were searching. They found a backpack. So I was there for some key moments, made a lot of new friends. That was a good part about it.
Yeah.
Also learned that the mainstream media was having a major conflict. I actually walked into that, so I wasn't expecting that.
Oh, really? What
Uh,
was that conflict?
well, they basically wanted the independent media, the YouTubers, as they call it, they wanted them to leave as soon as possible because they didn't have, maybe all the whistles and bells and credentials as the big mainstream media.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, it reminds me of what we might talk about today, just in terms of, meta and how popular social media is. And I'm afraid that influencers, non-legacy media, they're here to stay, and they are major competition for major people. They can ask for it, but I think the best thing that legacy media can do is integrate into it. So I'm not surprised that you saw that at all. What social media has done and what having the access to this has done is just given everybody kind of this equal playing field, and some of them almost have the same fair market value in terms of an NBC, which is incredible when you're talking about how long an NBC or CBS has been around, for them to look at, passing the baton or sharing the baton with an influencer that's been up for a few years. That's not a good feeling for them. So I can definitely understand where they're coming from, but certainly we know the writing is more than on the wall. Um, were you able to speak to any neighbors or people in the town, or was everybody kind of clammed up, which is how sometimes towns and locals are?
You're really good at what you do, I could tell.
Why is that?
No, I'm just kind of checking out your style while we're going through this. You're, as they say, excuse me, damn good at this.
Well, I
So
thank you.
so
And I'm rising to the occasion with you. So
yeah, you know what the neighbors said, and it's actually coming out in the media. I'm telling you, I picked up so much stuff. I talked to two different neighbors. One neighbor said that her mother was in a home, the father passed away.
hmm
They had lived in that neighborhood 50 years, pretty much the same time frame as Nancy Guthrie. Never locked the doors. She said the parents never locked their garage. If the neighbors needed something and they weren't home, they were welcome to pretty much go in, or if the child got displaced, they could come right over, open up the door and make themselves at home.
yeah,
So that was one of the issues. Another neighbor says, we never lock our back doors. So when I went there, I was under the impression like, man, the first thing you do at night is lock your doors and check them twice, right?
yeah.
So if you grew up that way, you would think that that's normal. But, and you would look at that case and say, there's no way this lady had her door unlocked, right? But getting boots on the ground, I realized that's a common trend. But while I was there, so many people started getting their different alarm systems installed that never had them before.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. When you were down south, you mentioned earlier that you're from the south. Did you lock your doors growing up?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I know. Look, I know you. Look, you're in New York now. I know you lock your doors.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when I'm sure you're going to see the interview tomorrow with Savannah Guthrie. I understand it's two parts. Did you attend a press conference out there at all?
No, I didn't attend the press conference because the last one that they had happened the day I was traveling in, and then basically he shut them down.
I see. Well, listen, you're firsthand, one thing about you, if people don't know it, and sometimes you have to be prodded, is your attention to detail is exceptional, which is why I wanted to make sure I asked these questions. And I can remember being in court cases and in court with you and coming out and seeing the things that you kind of gathered, and specifics and observations that you naturally would make about people. And so that's why I really wanted to ask you questions. So thank you for letting me flip it around a little bit, Mel,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and get your boots on the ground, through the lens of Mel seeing.
yeah. You know what else too that I was able to come to this conclusion while I was out there is that the ransom notes were real.
Now, why do you
And
say that?
before I went out there, I thought they were fake, right?
Okay.
Or I thought it was maybe somebody out in Africa, some other place just coming up with letters trying to get a come up.
Mhm.
But when I was there, I realized, in talking to some of the individuals that were related to the law enforcement, they basically reiterated what the FBI had said, that the first letter mentioned things that only the person that took her would have known,
I
like
see.
what she was wearing,
Mhm.
where the Apple White watch was located at the foot of the bed. Also,
Mm.
I had also heard through the grapevine that on the first day, maybe the January the 11th,
Yes.
the person actually broke the fog lights on that day, and that was mentioned in
Mm.
that's mentioned in that first ransom letter. So if the first ransom letter is real, notice the sheriff says we know why he did it, right? I
Yeah.
think I think the sheriff is trying to articulate that we know that they did it for the ransom because it's in the letter, and the letter mentions details that only the person that would have taken her would have known. See, I wouldn't have came to that conclusion unless I went out there myself and kind of put it together.
Yeah, and there was a point where it seemed like, I think they wanted it in Bitcoin or some type of cryptocurrency, right?
Yes,
Yeah, there
yes.
was a point where there seemed like that was a viable there seemed like there was high hopes at one point.
And you know what, too, while I was out there, that's when they started with the helicopters. I think while I was flying out there, they were doing the helicopters looking for her pacer signal.
Mm. Mhm.
And then they moved into the drones. And I noticed, right? Because I pay attention to a lot of things people don't
Yeah.
see. I noticed that while that was happening, this person sends a letter to TMZ saying, check this out. Oh, I saw her in Mexico. So that told me whoever did it is local and they're trying to send the police on a wild goose chase because they got nervous
Mm.
about that Bluetooth being that signal. I felt like, oh God, they're getting close to us to figure us out. Let's send another letter saying she's in Mexico, just trying to
Right.
throw the police off. So I still think at the end of the day, there's no real viable reason for anybody to take her other than someone that had an ulterior motive, probably someone close to her related to her. I mean, I can't shake it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But as I looked at the entire story, it looked like one big story that somebody wrote it, and then
Mhm.
they hired this guy to go take her. They wrote the letter. They're writing the letters. It's like they're running this whole show. And I think the guy at the door is a distraction. I think the letters
Mm.
are a distraction. And I think when you really look at it, like with Occam's razor,
Yeah.
it's gonna be real simple,
Right, right. It's just right in front of your face. It just
right in front of your
it
face.
is
Yeah,
what it is.
yeah, yeah. Like who would go in and take a lady that say? I mean, if they wanted to take her for the money, but even still, you would be so lucky that she wasn't paying for her subscription on the Nest. Like that's the basics. That's the bare minimum. You
Right.
know, that's
Right,
that's
right.
that's that's getting real lucky. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. And it
Yeah.
also seems as though someone who would wanted money would have acted more quickly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Um,
they would have never contacted TMZ. If you were trying to get that bag, as they say in this common vernacular, I'm getting the bag,
yeah.
they would do it with whispers. They would have reached out to Savannah and says, "Hey, I got your mom. You better give me this money. We can make a deal," right?
Right, right.
The person that's contacting TMZ is a person that's trying to distract somebody. They want all the fanfare
Yep.
because they're the ones that did it. You see what I'm saying?
I know, absolutely. I do. I do, and that has to that goes again. I won't,
It's really simple. I guarantee it's gonna be simple at the end of the day.
Right, right. Look, you're from
Mhm.
the South, so you can appreciate this. My grandmother would say, if it was a snake, it would have bit you, right?
It would have
Right
bit you.
there, right
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
right
right,
there,
right in front of
right
your
there.
face. Understood. Well, listen, tales from the ground. I really appreciate all the insight. Glad I had the chance to speak to you about all of this.
Yeah, I'll go back if there's a new development,
Yeah,
if they crack the case or something like that. So we'll
yeah. Well,
see.
look, go back after all this TSA stuff, okay? Because all these hours in line,
Oh
that's gonna be
my.
that's a whole problem, and that's gonna be literally taking an act of Congress in order to to change that. But anyway, glad that you
Right.
made it out there safely and that you are back and are ready to go back if need be.
Yeah. So what do you think about it? Speaking of the TSA, what do you think about people are still
My goodness.
having government shutdowns affecting people's money?
Yeah, I think that first of all, we are asking a lot of our men and women in service at the TSA to have them go to work for this long since February with no pay. Even people who are getting paid are having a hard time affording these high gas prices, high food prices. Add everything else from childcare to whatever mortgage or rent you're paying. There's no way that you can ask someone to just go ahead and, for the government's sake, go ahead and jump on in there and we need you to work for free. You can't ask people to do that. That's not even, that's just a bad way of doing business. Even in the regular, if you had a business, you can't ask somebody to work for free. That's against the law, right?
Right.
So the fact that they're asking all of these people to do this, I think, is absurd. And the fact that they have taken a stance and said we're not going to do it anymore is going to be a big bell ringer for people who don't understand how serious this is. Go to Atlanta yesterday and you were waiting 6 hours in order to get through TSA. Then that's going to have a ripple effect on the airlines. It's going to have a ripple effect of all the people who are involved there. And so this is going to be a real eye opener. Not everybody in Congress has private planes. So when they travel, it's going to affect them too. I think it's going to hit home finally because it's going to affect people on a personal level. And that's where we are. But we can't ask people to work for free. For what? Why would I work for free for anybody in
Right.
America?
And this is
Why?
the second time for them, right? Because they recently had the government shutdown not long ago. So,
Yeah, they did, and there were people who rewarded for their proper attendance of that $10,000. Hey, listen, it's been February. This $10,000 is not going to take you very long. No, not at all. So
right.
I think that this is really going to change the tide. Give it a week. It is going to change the tide. This is really ridiculous. You're gonna, something crazy is going to happen too. Something's going to backfire. There's going to be fewer. Listen, there was that accident over in LaGuardia. I'm not saying that it's all connected. I'm just saying that more accidents will happen because the right people are not going to be on the ground to do their jobs. It just has an effect, right? An effect on everything. So,
Right. Absolutely. So, what do you think about this whole war situation? A lot of people don't want to call it a war, but are you worried about it affecting you personally?
yeah, what was I just saw a video that I believe that the people, those in Iran, I meant to send it to you before we got on there, but it is something that we should not act like this just happens on the movies and happened, during Vietnam. We are in America. We are in a situation where the president is saying things that Iran is saying, what are you talking about? This hasn't happened. Trump recently talked about a gift that he got from Iran and he didn't want to go into the details. And they're saying, what are you talking about? We're- If you're talking to someone, you're talking to yourself, is what you said, because you're certainly not talking to us. That is not a very good feeling when it comes to countries that have the power in order to take certain parts of the United States out. And if you push someone hard enough, they'll make their move. Of course they will. We are literally playing with literal fire at the end of missiles. We are literally playing with people's lives. People have already died. So I'm not sure what more people, somebody's got to move the needle in order for better conversations to happen, and stop being so stubborn. The conversations that we're seeing in the media right now, they're either they're either so uh, focused in terms of one sided, or they just kind of don't make any sense, or they're confusing. Yeah, I'm afraid, and I think that people should know that this just doesn't happen in movies. There's no reason for me to think that things would not happen. In fact, since Trump has been in office, there used to be this threshold of no, that would never happen. Now I really look at things, anything can happen because the things that I thought couldn't happen, now they've already happened. So, all hands on deck, all eyes open, all ears, ready to hear some craziness, because we have been in this particular lane for a very long time, very long time.
Right. Could you take a moment and let everybody know? First, I want to say, guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe. Thanks for supporting the channel. Take a moment and tell everyone who you are, what you do, and how they can support you.
Yeah, well, you know what? The best thing you can do is follow me, Candace Kelly TV, on Instagram. That is where I am most active. Not active lately, though, I must say. But I make my rounds on shows. I need to post better and do more. I know, it's 2026. I'm also a professor at Rowan University, where I teach media law and a series of television courses where I teach people how to be on television. I teach people how to report, how to write, how to edit, how to go out and do a live shot, how to sit down and do some of this. And we put on newscasts and do a bunch of different things with the students down there at Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey, which is right outside of Philadelphia. So that's how I spend my time. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. So, the big question I want to know, what's up with Meta and this whole lawsuit?
Yeah. Not a good week for Meta. Not a good week for Meta. Meta has been a part of a couple of cases. One of the cases, the decision came down today that they, meaning Meta, as well as Google, were in fact liable for someone being addicted to their particular social media platforms. This has been ongoing for a while. For people who are following the case, we know that Snapchat, for example, they already settled, but it was Meta and it was Google. Which one? Anyway, they decided we're going to actually have a jury hear this particular case. And what happened was there was a $3 million award that was given so far in terms of compensatory damages. We haven't gotten to the punitive damages yet. And so this is where we are. So what the courts and the jury ultimately said was, you have a product design that is defective. They didn't say, that you should have been able to monitor what was on here because of Section 230. Listen, for people who don't know about Section 230, it's something that social media operations always lean on, and that Section 230 says that the person who provides the platform through which you might share a file or share a video that might cause someone mental illness, the person who has created that platform, they're not responsible. This is why this particular case is interesting, because it was a product liability case saying the product that you made, Mark Zuckerberg, is defective because as a result, I've been addicted. This is what the plaintiff said. I've been addicted since I was 6 years old to this particular platform. It's caused me mental illness. It's caused me challenges. It's made me think less about myself. And there are many attorneys general across the country who have also filed similar lawsuits. This is just the first one that we are hearing, and it's highly indicative of where these other lawsuits will go. And that's why this is very important. Certainly, Meta is going to appeal, but the jury said, you know what? The product that you made actually is addictive. That's the takeaway from all of this. You made a product that is causing mental health issues, and because of that, we need to hold you responsible. I think that Meta so far, in terms of that $3 million, they're responsible for 70%, and then the other 30% belong to their co-defendant. So we're going to hear more about this in terms of appeals, but I think what the takeaway is that Meta is now, the door is open for other cases to come down the pike and do the same thing. This young woman who's now 20 years old, she's not the only one that filed the case. We're going to see more from this.
Wow. Did you expect that outcome?
I got to say that I think it could, I was either way. I was 50-50. I followed the case, and depending upon who took the stand. I know when Mark Zuckerberg took the stand, he is not a very good I don't want to say public speaker. Listen, if you testify anyway and anywhere, it's going to cause a lot of consternation and angst that you've never felt before. It's different than sitting here with you. You're in front of a judge, jury, attorneys, and any time that I've seen her perform, if you will, it's been in front of Congress, and I hear about what he said inside of this particular case out of California. as a result, he's not good. And I'm just saying that there's a lot of pressure. And maybe I'm not good either on the witness stand. I've never been there, but he is not very good. And because of that, I know that that particular day when I listened to some of the things that he was saying, I said, yeah, I don't think that this is going to go his way. It is very difficult, especially if you have a parent or anybody who is sitting in a jury. We all know how addictive social media is. If you have a parent, you've probably had it out with your child. Put the phone away at dinner. Put the phone away at school. I got a call today. Put your phone away. I see your light in your bedroom. Shut it down. So, in terms of anybody having any empathy for Mark Zuckerberg, especially in this economy, and what he's doing, it's a whole problem. I am not surprised that a jury would see you actually are responsible. Listen, this is something that, unlike a pill, right, or medicine or food that goes through the process of the FDA, for example. He just started this platform. There was no oversight. The oversight came after all the laws that we've seen develop so far came after the test case. And who was the test case? Us, everybody who's in the world, all the 8 billion people who potentially have access to this. We are all the test case, and this is why we're seeing these problems. There aren't any rules. There weren't any rules. There weren't any laws that were put in place. He just threw it up, and then the rules came along the way, and that's why we're in this position. Even so, the guidelines that they have created, and this was another case, and maybe you can look it up. It escapes me, but there was another case this week that they lost because of how child predators were able to interact with people online. And this was also a case that they lost. And the court said, you're responsible there too. Your guidelines that you have in place, they're not saving anyone. If you go online and you create an account, the predators come to you. You don't even, according to, this is what the FBI did. They did an investigation, and they went online. They just created an account with a picture and a name, and they were 12 years old. They didn't even have to engage child sex predators. The predators came to them. And then if it was shut down, they were able to, with a different phone number, just start up a new profile. It shouldn't be that easy. There was also, as a part of this process, that there was a man who engaged in what they thought was a 12-year-old, and they were on the case as a part of all this in order to make their case as to how easy it was. The person who met them at the hotel was not a 12-year-old. It was the feds. So they brought significant evidence to court in order to make their case. And I think that that's just the biggest takeaway, that we are seeing now the courts finally deal with the onset of this. It's finally becoming this weird perfect storm to set precedent cases so that children aren't at risk, and then children who turn into adults aren't at risk and bring these issues into their adulthood. So, and excuse me while I just look up something, but I'm still listening.
Okay, very good. So I just want to tell you, speaking of the court, I'll be in court tomorrow with James. He's one of the attorneys that's in the audience. He's a moderator for the channel. We're
Oh,
gonna,
hey there. Excellent.
yeah, we're gonna have to give a shout out to James, but we're gonna be covering Nicolás Maduro tomorrow.
Yeah, now tell me, that that is going to be something. Wow. First of
Yeah.
all, can I ask you a question? And this is for people. I had a student ask me the other day, how do I get into the federal courthouse because of this terrorism case that he wanted to get into? What's your process? Because this is a big one. How do you prepare for getting into the court? It's a whole thing for people who don't know. And I will also say that anybody can go, right? But you have what it takes. You know what it takes. What can you tell someone who says, you know what? I'm actually going to stop by that courthouse. What should they know?
Well, if it's just a typical case, you could just get into, typically they have two lines, one for the public, the other one is for the media. So because I have a media pass, I typically go in as media, but
Mhm.
you can go in through the public. If the case is low profile, it's easy to get in through the public. They typically allow about 12 to 15 people, give or take.
Mhm.
If it's high profile, public or media side, it's tough to get in. And that's where we need line sitters to actually hold a spot for you through the night. Uh,
Mhm.
I've had someone hold a spot up to 24 hours. So, like for a Sean Diddy Combs case, it's really hard to get in. I was able to get in for 9 weeks. So just imagine. and that comes with a pretty hefty price tag, but it can be difficult. But getting a press pass makes it much easier. But the average person can get in. They can just walk right into the court. They're going to check you out. They typically won't even ask you for your ID unless it's some type of high tech case or some sort. But
Right.
you, but you could make it your effort to start following cases. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot easier when it warms up a little bit. The mornings are cold, but they're even colder when you have to be out there at 4 a.m. if that's going to be your route to take. Can I just say something before you get on? We continue this. I just want to say that with that case having to do with child exploitation and the rules that Meta did not set up. That was in New Mexico, and that was a $375 million award, which we of course know is going to be appealed. What are your expectations tomorrow? When you go to court, what's going to happen?
It's a follow up. I was there on his first attendance in court. Very dramatic, more dramatic than I attended Trump's trial, where he received 34 felonies. I attended Diddy, Harvey Weinstein, all of these high profile cases. But Nicolás Maduro, he brings a heavy crowd outside. You have Antifa, you have a lot of Venezuelans that don't like him, you have some that support him. And
Hmm.
then you just have people out there trying to document it and get some clicks and some likes. But inside the courtroom, it was quite dramatic because he walks out, he's actually talking to you, saying Happy New Year.
Wow.
He was acting like a guy that wasn't even incarcerated. His wife, on the first court appearance, her face was all bruised and battered and whatnot.
Yeah.
So he kept saying he was kidnapped by the American military
Yes.
out of his living room, I believe he said on a Saturday night. He kept talking about how he was kidnapped and how he needs to go back. The Venezuelan people do not have a president. So I imagine tomorrow he's going to try to perhaps get out because at the last court appearance, he did not seek to get any type of bail.
Yeah. Yeah. And the legality of the capture was what was at stake here, too, just in terms of can we do listen, the United States has done this before in terms of go get a president. But was this type of a military raid to capture him? Was that something that was legal? I know that that was on the table, as well as was there some type of immunity that he had as a head of state, which you think would come with the territory? Has that part been resolved?
You're asking the wrong person because I'm of the opinion that Donald Trump is above the law and
Mm,
and he makes the rules as he go. So if he wants you, he'll come and get you, and nobody will do anything about it.
yeah, yeah.
We don't
So
see you. You see the Supreme Court, right?
yes.
Are they messing with them? Congress, they're asleep, not at home when you knock, right? Nobody's paying attention. The Democrats are running scared because nobody wants Donald Trump coming looking in their closet. So it's a tough moment in time.
Yeah. I don't think that a trial date has been set yet. Are we still in the middle
No.
of motions and things of that nature?
Yeah, they're just clearing out a lot of the riffraff.
Yeah. I know that one time when we spoke about Maduro and you talked about his physical presence, which we know that means a lot in any courtroom because even if you don't take the stand, whoops, drop something. Even if you don't take the stand, you're actually saying a lot by just sitting there, right? We know Sean Combs didn't take the stand. Luigi probably won't take the stand, but just them sitting there, like, right, just the sweater that they're wearing, it says a lot. I am wondering, what does Maduro say with his presence?
Number one, he's a really big guy.
Yeah.
So he towers over everybody, bringing him into the courthouse. Um, when we covered Sean Diddy Combs, did you ever hear any type of chains before they brought Diddy into the courtroom?
You mean any type of change that he had on?
Yeah, chains that they
No.
were releasing.
No, that was a Luigi thing for sure. But no, with Sean, that was there. I don't believe there were chains that they asked to come off. No.
Okay, so with Maduro, we actually heard them taking the chains off of him and then they dropped it on the floor.
Oh my god. You know what?
That was a different type of party. You see what I'm saying? Now it's
Yeah,
like,
that is
wait a
a
minute.
different that is some drama for you.
Right, this guy was a president yesterday. Today he's in cuffs. But You know, he
Wow.
comes in, he has this whole way about him where he's talking about God. He's
Mm.
smiling. He's saying that the American people kidnap him.
Yeah.
He's really leaning on that. You know how they have this thing in the court, like with Sean Diddy Combs, where they say the cat is already out the bag.
Yes.
So sometimes the defense would throw something out there just to sway the jury and say, "Oh, I'm sorry," because by the time the judge says, "Hey, I thought I told you you couldn't do that," it's too late. The jury has already been tampered with. You see what I'm saying? So by him saying continuously, it's kind of like with Luigi Mangione case. They keep calling his journal a manifesto, and
Right.
the prosecutor kept calling him the executioner. Like during the trial, that would have a tremendous weight. So with Maduro, he has this presence where he's saying things to try to sway the media and curry favor for himself.
You know, that just seems to be a theme of tonight in terms of that the media, it does play a very large part in the court system, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. I mean, it just always has. But you're right. Calling Luigi's writings a manifesto, his attorney said you can't do that. And so we are not going to hear that word when he goes to trial, which is another interesting question in terms of these two trials and whether it's double jeopardy. I think we're talking about June and September, June for the state case and September for the federal case.
Right.
And the last thing that he cried out was 1 + 1 = 2. Two trials, he meant, for the same topic. And that is something that we're going to hear his attorneys talk about and argue that this should not happen. Interesting argument, not one that I think will win, but an interesting argument.
You know what I noticed about him? And I think I said it on the channel and somebody disputed me of some sort, but I kept saying it makes sense in this case to try to go with insanity, although they may not play that card.
Right.
But you know how a person has a child that's disruptive for whatever reason, and
Sure.
the parents will be in the conference with the kids or church, and they be
Mhm.
like, "Johnny, don't do it now," and they look at him, "Don't do it here," right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So his attorneys kept looking at him the whole time, like, "Okay, don't do it. Okay, Luigi, stay with us. Don't flip
Right.
out." So this last time he did that, he had an outburst as he was leaving court when he said 1 + 1 is, 2 and double jeopardy. So I knew that moment was coming because I was reading the guy pretty well. And when
Yeah.
it happened, I was like, see, I told one of my guests, this guy is going to come across as though he may have some issues.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah,
playing that part quite well, I must say. That's just my observation. Might not
yeah.
mean anything. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And when it comes to double jeopardy, the state laws are actually stronger than the federal laws. Um, and which is why they want to make sure that the order of cases kind of listen the attorneys are arguing for their side, right? And
Right.
so I we it is to be determined, I think, the order of these cases, but that double jeopardy is something to think about. But that is the way that the system is set up. It is a lot, though. We know that a trial is very grueling. The depositions and the witnesses and the sharing of the evidence of both sides and preparing the witnesses, going to court, doing motions to suppress and motions for this and motions to that, motions to dismiss where you can. And if you're doing that at the same time, you're doing the state and the federal, I think at the very least, there might be more time in between because it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work.
Right. Right. Someone in the audience says you referring to him as Luigi makes me feel like you support him.
Oh, no, no. You know what? It's funny that they say that. I think because of his age and because I teach students, I think I'm naturally just calling him by his first name. He reminds me, but for the killing, of the students. Like he's in that same age group. I just feel like I know he's a grown man, but I also feel like he's a kid in some ways. So yeah, I'm calling him Luigi, I guess, because and plus when you spend so much time with a person, whether it's reading about them and learning all about their parents and where they live and their cousin who holds an office in political, yeah, I guess you just I don't know. Maybe you feel I don't know. Maybe it's just a natural inclination to call him that. because I'm sitting with this guy for hours at a time when I prepare for shows like this. So no, that has nothing to do with
I think it was
supporting.
more. It may have been directed toward me. I was going to answer it, and
Oh, okay.
so I don't even think it was you because I call him Luigi.
Oh, okay.
Listen, I talk so much up here. You're lucky I can remember Luigi Mangione or anything else. So I'm just saying whatever I can remember at the any given time. Sometimes, so it is what it is.
Yeah, no,
Right.
it is what it is. There's nothing meant by it. Listen,
It doesn't mean that's like insane to say that I would like the guy because I'm referring to him as Luigi. You know what I mean?
right, right. There's a sense of familiarity, especially, you see this guy more than I do. Shoot. I remember during the Sean Combs case where he was not in detention the first time that I covered him back in 2001. So I'm going way back. This was the shooting case where Jennifer Lopez was in the car. So in between, we have a break, we go to lunch, we come back, you go home. At all those times, we would be leaving or in break with Sean Combs, like just out in the hall, hanging with Sean. So even though I knew him, in college just a little bit, and I'm not saying that, we're on a first name basis. I just remember him being on the yard handing out flyers for parties, doing the same thing that he perfected. But when you are that close to I was calling him Sean. You're sitting there all day with him in breaks. I see him getting a water break from the same water fountain that we all drinking out of. So you do have a different familiarity when you are covering a story because you are amongst them. You really are amongst them.
Right. Even with President Trump, when I covered his case in New York City, his trial,
Yeah.
there were times when there was one day when the judge kicked everybody out of the courtroom. So Donald Trump comes back in the lobby area.
Okay.
He's standing right there with us,
Really? All
Yeah,
right.
like
So,
he wasn't divided. He was just standing there talking to people, just being President Trump. Like
all right, you got to take us there. So, what was his presence like?
it was amazing because he was a former president. And you know what it's like. I was out there. It was kind of cold outside, so just to get in some days was tough. But I would sit on the edge, and he would just come walking right by. There's nothing in between us but air. I mean, he's
Yeah.
right. He's right there walking by. He's smiling and interacting. So to have that experience with any former president, I think it was amazing. But for
Yeah.
the most part, while he was in court on the different days, he would be sleeping most of the day. Like he would go sit down, it would be nap time. He
Wow.
seemed like he didn't want to be there, but he went through the process.
Mhm.
And, unlike Diddy, he wasn't incarcerated. So he would walk in,
Right.
staggered from when we would go in,
Mhm.
unless when the time when the court was cleared out, then he's just coming out right with us.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see what mostly powerful men so far we've talked about today and how they're so powerful out in the world. But when you get in that courtroom, all the same. Do you remember the time where Judge Arun Subramanian, he was livid because he didn't like the way that Sean Combs was shaking his head at some of the jurors. And in fact, for those of you who saw the Netflix documentary, The Reckoning, there was a juror who made reference to that. There was like a little bonding. It's interesting to see how people use their power inside of a courtroom where their power is really kind of orchestrated and managed. Trump slept. Sean Combs, he would look back and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Right? He would look people in the eye. He would say, "Speak to a pregnant mother. How when are you due?" He'd be very involved in it. Luigi, he looks back too. Sometimes he knows he's got fans. So it's interesting. Maduro, as you said, he brings up God and he speaks to people, Merry Christmas, that type of thing. Interesting to see how people wield their power inside of a place that kind of equals the playing field, in a sense. Very interesting.
I covered the Alexander brothers too. We didn't talk about that one.
Oh my
I
goodness.
told you I'm in every case pretty much. Let me tell you one quick thing before we go there,
Now,
which
now you cannot throw the Alexander brothers out there with 120 seconds left. I will not
yeah,
let you. We got it. Can you get three? Can we go to 8 to 901 tonight? I'm gonna let you go. Let me stop
yeah,
talking.
yeah, we could go. With Sean Diddy Combs, I don't want to say too much
Yeah.
because sometimes, yeah, I have to word this carefully. But anyway, with Sean Diddy Combs, initially in the case, I won't tell you what changed his mind. He was sitting there, and when Cassie and people were talking, he was subdued. For
Yeah.
some reason, he must have heard a whisper. And then when those negative words would come out, he started responding. So he's like, no, no, no. And that's what the girl's referring to on the jury. She was like, yeah, I would look out at Sean Diddy Combs. And when they said he did that, he was like, no, no, no. So somebody must have gave him a good tip. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Mhm.
So
You're
with
gonna
the
leave that
Alexander,
there, huh?
yeah, with the Alexander brothers, right?
How were they, these great
When
men of power in the realtor world, who, according to testimony, the girl said, "I don't wanna have sex with you," and he said, "Guess what you already did." How did they act in court?
You know what it was? Every time the girls would get on the stand and talk about what they did,
Yeah.
because with Sean Diddy Combs, it was more like a relationship, so it was blurred lines because people were like, "Well, this is his girlfriend, side chick," but these are people that he's known for years, and they're just having a Bobby and Whitney moment. That's what people had in their mind, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
The Alexander brothers would find girls on dating sites, bring them in, put them on the yacht, show them this money, and then all of a sudden they drink some juice and start feeling funny. Next thing you know, somebody's on top of them while they waking up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when the girls would state what happened to them, those guys were so subdued, they looked so guilty.
Mm.
So most people don't realize that in court, you're actually telling a story with your presence. And
Yes.
because they look like criminals, it makes it easy for the jury members to say guilty. I'm just giving my observation, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, and, the fact that they were, and this is why people do not get tried together, right? Because then you're associated with someone who might be slightly more guilty. The fact that it was the 3 of them all in court, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yes, all
This
three.
Yeah, that visually, I wondered, did it seem like there was this natural mob mentality that, it's easier to do something when there's 3 of you than just 1, and while I do think that they're guilty, it did not help that the 3 of them were sitting in that court case from the same bloodline. I'm thinking, "Well, how did they grow up?" And it seems like maybe they just understood and saw the world in the same way, that this was okay. If I were a juror, it would make better sense that this did happen, because, listen, especially because of the fact that there were young women who testified. I know at least 2 who came from money. So that typical, "She's lying, this is a money grab, don't believe her," didn't work. In fact, one of them said something I will never forget, talked about it in class the next day, and she said, "I don't need their money. I just don't want them to have the money." And that's what the court system is set up for. And I thought that that was very powerful. She doesn't want the money. The punishment is you don't get the money, sir. You don't get the money, sir, and neither do you. And I thought that that was powerful. And I never quite heard it put that way.
And you know what's different? They had pretty much the same attorneys as Diddy had to a certain extent, right? The two
Mhm.
lead attorneys, right?
Yes. Oh, you
But
mean as in Mark and Karen
right. No, it's
Agnifilo?
Mark Agnifilo and I believe Tenny Garagos.
Oh, Tinny. It was, yeah. Well,
So
and it makes sense to have Tinny. You have a woman on there that's always very helpful. But go ahead.
right. So here's an observation that we could probably learn from because I see everything pretty much. With Sean Diddy Combs' mother, I got to know her quite well.
Mhm.
During the case, you could tell she was very pensive and she was concerned. And she always had this moment like, you really need to do this because they're going to lock him up. She was aggressive with the attorneys, really fighting and, trying to push it so he could win as much as possible.
Yeah.
In the case of the Alexander brothers,
Mhm.
their parents had this whole air about them that they were going to win the whole time. Oh, these
Really?
girls, almost like these girls are lying.
And how did
And,
that
and
translate? How did you get that from them?
we're in the same cafeteria. I could
Yeah.
see and hear different things, that they felt. But I wanted to tell them, you might be setting yourself up for failure here You have to take this easy because they just thought that they were going to pull this off. I don't know why, but
Hmm.
this is just my interpretation of what I observed. So
You know,
when it happened, it was like crashing into a stone wall.
really, what was, the judge always says no reaction. Being there, was there a reaction that you can recall?
Yeah, action of from the family side, they were shocked by the outcome. I mean, it was devastating because I think they felt throughout the whole time these guys were going to win. And even now, I mean, there's rumors that Donald Trump would likely pardon them. And
Hmm.
I could see it happening. So, but at any rate, they're locked up right now.
Yeah, I think that the timing of pardoning men who have been accused of raping women over a period of years in the middle of Epstein during a week when a young woman said, "Yeah, Trump raped me." That's gonna the timing, the timing can't be now. I mean, that is something they are trying to bury and get away from. Um, Wow, it seems like we are hearing. I mean, listen, today we talked about child predators online, and then we talked to Alex about the Alexander brothers, and I just mentioned Trump and Epstein is also taking the headlines as up as much as Iran. We have a real problem that we continue to shed light on when it comes to how women and children and young men too are being treated in this world. We are in a very eye-opening precedent setting time. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I was just thinking because we've covered so many of these events together.
Yeah.
Ooh, the catalog looks crazy right now. I've
Yeah.
covered so many cases. I'll tell you this. This is off the record.
Uh-oh. Off the record, but on air. Go ahead. Make
Yeah.
it work.
So a week ago, I went to Tasha K's birthday party.
Oh, you know what? Was that in
So
DC?
yeah, in DC.
Yeah, a
So
friend of mine, he was on the way. He was like, "Do you know Atasha K?" I was like, "You're going to a birthday party? You don't know who she is?" But go ahead.
yeah, so that was exciting. That was fun. I had a lot of fun there.
I would imagine. Yeah, yeah. A lot of people came out.
A lot of people packed out. They call them the winos. It was a great event.
Yeah, she's got a really big following. A lot of people have certain feelings about her, but the truth be told, and again, this has to do with media, is that she has that personality. She gets it in. She has made some mistakes on the way. I see that she's corrected a lot. We see that Cardi B is going after that money. Again, another through line that we've talked about is the media, how you are and how you present in this world, and what you should know before you jump in. And this is important to me to talk about because this is what I teach. I'm not saying that you have to have a 4-year degree to be a journalist and all that, but you better know some rules before you get out there and start running your mouth. Or you're going to open
Yeah.
yourself up to defamation and things of that nature. Um, was it dancing at the party? What was that like?
Yeah, amazing. I realized that even, you see her online and so forth. I've gotten to know her quite well,
Yeah.
but she is talented beyond compare.
Yeah.
She's just a natural talent. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, she can entertain. Her whole life is entertainment. I mean, I don't even know if you can duplicate that. It's just
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, no, there are and that's why this is the time of, Netflix taking podcasts and making it centerpiece. We're probably not going to move from unless unless they shut this down where social media no longer is going to have legs. That's never going to happen. We know that there's been a challenge to social media over the years by way of TikTok. But we see how that was managed and massaged so that it wouldn't go away, so that people like Tasha K and you could continue to do what you do. It's a wonderful thing, I think, for the First Amendment. However, as I said, it is not without guidelines and constraints. And so just know what you're doing before you get on this mic. So,
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. Anderson became a member. Thank you so much. And you gifted a membership too. Thank you. You're far too kind. That's amazing. What do you think before we check out of here? I don't
yeah.
think we've had a chance to talk about Don Lemon. What do you think in regards to him?
Look, which part? Just the whole with his arrest and what's coming up with him?
Yeah. Do you think they have a leg to stand on as far as him going into the church and trying to cover the protests?
The only thing so overall no, because the First Amendment reigns supreme. The only thing that's going to be from, I'm the prosecutor in this is that the conversations that he had off camera, not even off camera, on camera, but not as a presentation, that you hear him talking about um talking with people who are part of the protest. But people know who, when you're a journalist and you um embed yourself with someone, or you're trying to get next to the subject, it's kind of typical. So just going to be a matter of making people understand that when you are out there, you might speak with someone that you see as an enemy. That's how you get the story. And in fact, that's how he got the story. That's how he got inside, right? And so he actually could have attended there quietly, right, without any type of recording. He had the right to be there. When things got out of hand, he didn't leave. Okay, that's what a journalist does. When bombs go off in a war, journalists don't pack up and go, they cover the war. And so I think that it's going to be some good storytelling that has to be told in order to get the jury to see, and hopefully a jury of his peers. That's why we have the jury selection and process in place in order to make that happen. I think that he'll be fine. Sometimes, though, people will take you to court not because they think they're going to win, but they want to put you through the process. And that's what I think this is. It's not because they think they're going to win. They want him to take the time, take the money, take the emotional hit, take the, social currency hit, and make him go through this process. And then at the very end, they actually don't care what the outcome is, but they've put him through the fire and they want to see him burn a little bit. And I think that that's what this is ultimately about.
Do you think it's because he often talks about Donald Trump through a negative light in many cases?
Yeah, and it's one of those things. Negative light. Is it negative light? And I understand your question, but I'm parsing this because, again, let's go into a courtroom. Is it negative light, or is it something that Donald Trump did that or said that was just off, bizarre, silly, crazy, or wrong? Isn't that, or was it just his opinion, which is protected by the First Amendment? So I think, again, it's going to be going to that storytelling. And but to answer your question, is it because of that? Yes. Donald Trump is on his case because he doesn't like being talked about. He doesn't like, sometimes it's self-inflicted wounds. He doesn't like those wounds being dissected by doctors like Don Lemon. And so he's one of the people that is on his list in terms of, monitoring them and making sure that they don't say anything about him. And he's one of those people that wants to bring Don Lemon down. The First Amendment reigns. The problem for Donald Trump about the First Amendment is that he's using it too for his platform. So you can't have, this in one hand and then not expected to be in the other hand for the other person. You can't fight against the First Amendment. That's ultimately would set bad precedent for Donald Trump. Then he'd have to shut up. Donald Trump does not want to shut up. Therefore, Don Lemon is not going to be told by the court system that you have to, lean back in any way. That's not how the First Amendment worked. Never has, and it never will. Granted, there have been different constraints. Don't get me wrong. In fact, a case came out today in terms of the Supreme Court. Was that today or this week at least, where there was a blogger and she sued a police officer because of some information that she was trying to get from him. He claimed that there was immunity, and the court said that, in fact, her First Amendment rights were not protected and that his immunity, the police officer's immunity, won in that case. So, yes, it's kind of being, chopped at a little bit. But overall, Don Lemon and Donald Trump have the same mouthpiece, the same platform. He would knock himself out by going after Don Lemon in the way that he really wants to.
So let me ask you this question. When it comes to freedom of religion and freedom of the press, which one rules?
So depending upon now, that's a very good question. Depending upon where you are, if you are on church grounds, you're right, that's going to be a big one. He was on grounds whereby that's another thing, the trespassing issue here, because that church, I believe they told him to leave. Did they tell him to leave? I can't remember. The bottom line is that he was in a church, and that they didn't want him there towards the end, and that is going to also be an issue. That's going to be a little bit of a stickler, actually. So freedom of religion, because he was on their grounds. That's going to be one that I think he's going to win, but it's going to be one again that's going to have to be super explained because freedom of religion um, and freedom of the press are both in the same amendment. So you're going to see that tug of war in terms of how the First Amendment plays out. But they're both so important, which is why the First Amendment is first in the list of amendments, right? There, you could have had a lot being first. You know, the right to bear arms could have been the First Amendment. Search and seizure could have been number one. Number one, they made, right? The freedom of the press, the freedom of religion, the freedom to congregate, right? All of these things. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. I don't have an answer because again, they both carry quite a bit of weight.
Right. Because I think if I saw it correctly, and don't quote me on this, I think there's a point in the video where he says something like, well, I don't want to go in there because if they see me, they're going to know we're about to do something. Something to that effect.
Yeah,
And I know they waited till after the prayer had stopped, and that's when they started the protest. I'm speaking loosely off of memory.
yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe that's when he came in to cover the story. And I think this is what Cash Patel is trying to put the screws to him. Because you know what was scary about this case is that Cash Patel seemed to be very versed. You know how sometimes it's kind of like Mark Agnifilo is so versed on Diddy's life and his whole case.
yes.
When I saw that Cash Patel was spitting out all the facts about Don Lemon on that day, I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my God, you're in hot water now because you have this guy, the leader of the pack, taking your case personally. That could be a problem, you know."
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know that they're on the case the way that he was spewing off all of those facts. I guess the other question that becomes very pivotal is was he involved in the demonstration as a demonstrator because of the way that they're going to say the way that he went in with them, right? Or was he a journalist that kind of was really just alongside of them, covering them doing their thing? And again, being in court is all about storytelling, and they're going to have to explain what journalists do. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we'll hear more
Because
about that.
because I think what they're trying. This is just my perspective of
Yeah.
looking from the outside. I think what they're trying to say is that basically he knew what they were going to do, and he came to cover it as a part of that unit.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like if I say, "Hey, tomorrow I'm going to go rob a bank," and then you say, "Okay, I'm going to come and cover it."
Sure.
You know they're going to lock all of us up.
Exactly, exactly. It's like, okay, so you just waited for this to happen. But again, journalists have these rights in order to get the story. It's kind of like people always talk about, hey, you see these people in these videos in some third world country, and the little kid is dying with a bloated stomach. It's like, well, you're the
Right,
cameraman. Did you have any food? Well, you kind of have to make a distinction as to who you're going to be in that situation. I mean, sometimes journalists do help. If you see somebody who's drowning and the story that you're covering has to do with, lifeguarding, if you can help, you're going to help. Put the camera down. But in this case, that is going to be the distinction. Did he go with these protesters and charge the congregants, or was he just alongside them? Again, that's what journalists do, though. They
right.
are
It's going to
out
be
there.
hard. I think it's going to be hard to get 12 people to come to that idea, you
Yeah,
know. But we'll
I
have
think
to
so
wait and
too.
see. You know
Yeah,
what the thing is, though. What I learned from Sean Diddy Combs and some of these other cases, whether you win or whatever, by the time you miss all those meals and you're just stressing about what could happen,
yeah.
it's not worth the journey, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a he's on a tough journey no matter what.
No,
And by the time you yeah,
absolutely. There's one thing they can't refute. Don Lemon is a journalist and he
yeah.
covers stories. So he's
I
got
think he's probably one of the top out there. I mean, I guess
sure.
he's especially independent.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Right,
So yeah, we
absolutely.
will see.
So, all right. Well, thank you. We've reached over our time, but it was a great day, a great time. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, so did I. Good to see you. Hey, listen, we are back just in time for the weather to break. Let's continue to do this and I will see you soon.
All right, very good. Would you like to say some parting words to the watchers?
I would just say this. I'm a very strong believer in what social media is doing. That has been a thread in everything that we've talked about, every single thing. And what that is doing. just be mindful of social media and how much you're on there, and how you interact with people on a real face-to-face level. It is great sometimes to put that phone down. We've been talking about that as the crux of many of the cases that we've been discussing, and it shouldn't really be taking our lives over our lives like that. We do have to do better as human beings. Interact with someone tomorrow in a way that you haven't. Put the phone down. I'll leave you with that.
All right. That's amazing. We appreciate having you here. I speak on behalf of the watchers. It's amazing to have someone come on the channel to perform at the highest level as yourself.
Thank you
Thank,
so much.
thank you. We'll see you next Wednesday night. Until then, be well
All
and
right.
keep on shining. Thank you.
Different voices, but the same song. Loving a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days inside. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. The colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.